Hi there. Welcome to Student Engagement Practices and Ways to Increase Student Participation to Decrease Undesired Behavior. My name is Rebecca Camp. I'm a behavior interventionist in Northwest ISD. I want to go ahead and give some thanks to Dr. Diane Myers for sharing her class-wide positive behavior intervention supports granted permission for us to use this and adapt this training. So typically with an audience, this training was designed to gain feedback through Peer Deck. And so as we go through and any questions I ask, typically to solicit audience response, you can take note and maybe write down on paper some of the answers that you might have. So fact or opinion, all students are intrinsically motivated to learn. I've got a hint. We all come to work and receive some sort of reinforcement. For example, that paycheck certainly helps motivate employees to show up. So we could probably look at this as an opinion. Throughout life, we would love to think that we are intrinsically motivated for all things, but we really do rely sometimes on external motivation. So classroom engagement behavior. So take a moment to think about what it looks like for a teacher to be engaged, and then take another moment, if you'd like to write down one for each, what the student behavior, what a student looks like engaged in the classroom. Remember, behavior influences behavior. So your engagement heavily influences student engagement. So actively engaging students. This is one teacher behavior that is consistently associated with improved student behavior and increased student achievement. So think about how can teachers actively engage students during instruction? And that's what we're going to cover today, but I encourage critical thinking and creativity on your behalf to think about what it looks like in your classroom. So ways to actively engage students. One way to actively engage students is to provide frequent opportunities to respond. You could do individual versus group response. You can increase participatory instruction, and think of ways you could do that. Consider the various observable ways to engage students. You could do written response. These are just examples. Writing on individual whiteboards, choral responding, gestural, and then think of some others. These can also, remember, this can be used, all of these can be used virtual or in-person learning. I'm going to show you a little video over opportunities to respond. It's a short video. It actually counts up for you the amount of times he provides opportunities to respond, but look at the various ways in which he did so.
All right, let's jump right into fractions. Who remembers what page we were on with fractions yesterday when we stopped? Yeah, what?
246.
246 is right. Could I see everybody turn to page 246, please? That's where we're going to start today. When you get to page 246, I'd like you to look for the part that says improper fractions. That's where we left off. Put your finger on it where it says improper fractions, please. Improper fractions, got your finger there? Okay, so if you see there, the step says how to divide. So I want you to look at this first one up here on the board. Raise your hand if you think you know the answer to this one. Yeah, what do you think the answer is to this one?
2.
She says that it could be simplified to 2. Raise your green card if you agree with her. Lots of agreement. I agree also. It is 2. Very good. That's exactly the way you do it. You divide. So if she's right and we divide, then what I'd like you to do is write down the answer to this one on your paper real quick.
Okay, so he actually provided, it says 6 different ways for various opportunities to respond. So note that it doesn't always have to be academically related to the content. He asked for the page number that they were on the previous day, asked for the students to turn to the page, asked them to point to where they are in the material. These don't have to actually be answered questions that are academically related. These are actually these are engagement strategies, such as, do you agree or disagree with the cards, the red and the green cards? So think about creative ways that you can utilize these in your classroom so that you can keep your kids actively engaged with a faster pace, but not difficult questioning and opportunities to respond. So, which aspects of instruction influence behavior? Many student problem behaviors stem from issues with instruction. So, which aspects of instruction can influence student behavior? All of them, including pacing. Let's stop and talk about pacing for just 1 second. So, also, when we talk about all aspects of instruction impacting student behavior, pace can impact student behavior dramatically. So what happens if your pace is too fast? And then think about what happens if your pace is too slow. How can the difficulty of a task impact student behavior? How can a mismatch between task and the learner's ability influence the student behavior? How can variation or a lack thereof affect the student behavior? And teacher enthusiasm. How does a teacher's level of enthusiasm affect the student behavior? So how can teachers project more enthusiasm? If you're excited about what you are teaching, your students will be excited. Even if it's not the most exciting material, make it more interesting for students. You can also increase reinforcement for more challenging work. Involve the students as much as possible. Also think about this as an opportunity to increase reinforcement with some of your students who are struggling. So you can incorporate, and we'll talk about this just in a moment, incorporate some of their interest, as well as all your students, but some of them who are struggling with behavioral issues in the classroom, really hit on some of their interest and incorporate that. And your enthusiasm goes a long way. And always investigate the academic connections to behavior problems. Instructional adjustments are often easier to make than we think, and they can have an immediate and sustained impact on our students' behavior. So what are some other ways to increase academic engagement? You can incorporate, like we just talked about, students' interest into the lessons. So you could ask them what shows and movies they like and use characters' names and examples. You could relate assignments to the real life situation and examples. And this is a really good thought when you're moving. This is all across the board. So age appropriate, and generationally appropriate, influential topics that relate to students' interest. Offer choice whenever possible. So letting the students choose the order in which they complete the assignments, or let them choose if they want to work with a partner or individually, or say what format they would enjoy working with. Offer those choices when you're planning so that you can touch each student's needs. And also, once again, going into their own interests and preferences. Giving students the choices can increase their interest in the lessons and give them a sense of ownership over their own instruction, both of which can increase the likelihood of the appropriate behaviors. You can think about the task dimensions that we're about to go into and how they'll impact your students' behavior when you're planning your lessons. So there are 6 task dimensions. So history. The history of a task can be old, familiar, or new. Is the task something that the student has never seen before, or is the task something in which the student has a lot of experience, is familiar with? How could task history impact the student behavior? Like an example, a brand new task could be frustrating for a student and may occasion some challenging behavior. Response form. The response form of a task can be a yes or no, choice, or production. For instance, you could ask, is Austin the capital of Texas? That would be a yes or no question. Is the capital of Texas Austin, Houston, or Dallas? That would be the choice question. What is the capital of Texas? That's a production question. And which of these is most likely to occasion problem behavior? Many times, production may occasion the problem behavior because it's the most difficult for students. The modality of the task can be written, oral, or gestural. So how could this impact student behavior? Students who don't like to talk or read out loud in class may have problems with the oral modality. Students who have trouble writing may have problems with the written modality. Complexity. A task can be hard, easy, or somewhere in the middle for students. How could this impact the student behavior? Hard tasks could cause students to become frustrated, leading to problem behavior. Easy tasks could lead to boredom, which also could lead to problematic behavior. Scheduling the task. So tasks can vary in length and sequence. How could this impact the student behavior? Longer tasks can become boring for students or increase the likelihood of problem behavior. Moving too quickly between tasks can also be very frustrating. Lastly, variation of tasks can impact student behavior. Doing the same type of task over and over, for example, lecturing, can lead to boredom and frustration, which can occasion the problematic behavior as well. So this table shows the 6 task dimensions and the options for each. In reality, any dimension of the task can occasion problem behavior. That's because the appropriateness of a task dimension depends on the learners and not the task itself. Okay, some data collection talk. What are some student and teacher behaviors that would be relevant in actively engaging students? Number of opportunities to respond, which we talked about. Students' rate of participation. Teachers' use of varied instructional methods. And think about some others, and think about your classroom. Some things that you could set goals for yourself or goals for your student. So remember, as we're going through each of these categories of the evidence-based practices in classroom PBIS, we will be discussing opportunities for data collection. So next is a scenario that typically would be a 15-minute activity, but since we are doing a recording and not soliciting audience response and involvement, I'd like you to read over it and answer the questions regarding task dimensions and things that could be changed and any other classroom management issues that you would like to adjust. Those 2 are actually the follow-up questions for you to think about. So while reading through this, think about some answers you may have, and we will list the task dimensions. I'll list the task dimensions once again after reading the activity. I'm not going to spend a minute to record, so if you want to pause this right now to read the activity and then move on, that is probably the best bet. So I hope you were able to toggle between the slides and talk about task dimension adjustments and other classroom management concerns. If you were the co-teacher, how would we help Mr. Sargent? All right, remember, if your students are having problem behaviors or behavior concerns, look at your instruction first. Think about how you can change your teaching and the environment to decrease the likelihood of inappropriate behavior or undesired behavior. It is much easier to change your own behavior than students' behavior. That's the focus of this training. So remember that behavior influences behavior and your engagement influences the student engagement. Thank you guys so much. Take a look at these references and resources. Dr. Myers, once again, provided the foundations for this training, and also please check out the NISD Behavior Intervention website listed above.